talk more specifically about trombone technique, let's acknowledge the primary thing that separates the instrument from all of the other instruments, which of course is the slide. I want to encourage you to encourage your students to learn true positions, meaning that there is an actual first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh position. Of course, later in development, there will be nuances in pitch where the slide can and should be adjusted for these. But early in development, students should strive to place the slide in the exact right spot. Especially in the further positions like fifth, sixth, and seventh, we want to avoid no man's land and homogenizing these positions. There should be a true fifth, sixth, and seventh. As you work your ensemble, just like there is a correct and exact fingering for every note for all other instruments, so too must the trombone positions be. Similarly, invest in good slide technique. How often do we hear the trombone sound too trombone-y and smeary between notes? Good slide technique is essential to fixing this, where the slide is perfectly in sync with the air input. Instead of saying move the slide fast, say move the slide at the right time. Because distances will change between notes, meaning that if I'm going from first to second versus first to sixth, the slide will inherently move faster, but keep the focus on the coordination rather than the speed, and let the speed take care of itself. Bullseye those slide positions just as you would bullseye the notes. I'm going to give an example of playing a B-flat major scale, and I'm going to utilize my practice approach of air sync play. What I want you to notice is that my slide, the distance will change between notes, but the coordination is what I'm focusing on, making sure that my air and my slide are moving at the same time. So starting with my air. Watch my slide. And then put it together. You'll notice that in these individual air events, that my slide is moving at the exact time as my input. So if I were to change the air that I'm using and put it on the glist end of the air spectrum, the only thing that changes is the air. The slide technique and the coordination remains the same. Just as the slide is unique to the trombone, so is slurring on the instrument. I've heard band directors simply say that trombone should just tongue every single note, which is simply incorrect. We should strive to slur just as well as our valve friends, and they don't tongue every single note. They use that sustained air on the glist end of the air spectrum, and so should we. In brass, as we cross the overtone series between partials, an event takes place called a natural slur. There's no tongue, it's all air going between those partials. The difference, of course, is when we change notes on the same partial. If we don't tongue on the one partial between notes, a glist will occur. If we take a look at our partial diagram, every single one of these partials represents, and our positions, represents where those natural slurs take place. So this is what I played for you earlier, and this is our second position, and so on. Anytime you cross over to one of these partials, that natural slur will take place. So if we go back to our B-flat major scale, and we start with our B-flat in first position, and C goes all the way to 6, you're going to see that a partial is going to be crossed and a natural slur will take place. But as I continue up the scale, going up to C, D, E flat, and F, all of these notes are on the same partial and a glist will occur. So as I'm coordinating my slide with my air input, I'm going to put a light articulation da on D, E flat, and F. And you can see as I go forward, F going up to G in fourth position is going to cross a partial. So my natural slur is going to occur there. If I continue on, A and B flat will need their da articulation. Here's without. And with. The same is true as you descend. The natural slur takes care of the break between C and B flat, G and F, and so on. So a good practice technique is to actually say your ta, das, and ahs. So if we start on tuning note B flat, and let's work our scale going down, any note that's on the partial, we're going to put a da, and then as we cross, we're going to put an ah. So for example, it's going to be ta, da, da, ah, da, 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 ah. And then the second step is to turn that into your airstream. And again, since your air only knows those 5 things, start, stop, increase, decrease, stay the same, we're focusing on that last one, stay the same. The air doesn't know that we're tonguing. The air doesn't know that we're moving the slide. The air just knows to stay the same. And when I put that on the trombone, you should ideally get a good clean slur. Another very useful practice exercise for trombones to learn this technique is simply to gliss the whole thing. The natural slurs will automatically present themselves, and you'll learn where to place those da articulation. So hopefully you can clearly hear that B flat to C is a natural slur, F to G is a natural slur. Another general rule is that if the pitch goes up and the slide moves out, a natural slur will take place. Conversely, if the pitch goes down and the slide comes in, a natural slur will take place. So now let's do an exercise. Let's go from B flat up to high F, and we're going to use our regular primary positions and figure out our ta, das, and ahs. So B flat to C, ta, ah, da, ah, da. Ta, ah, da, ah, da. But what if I change and use a different alternate position? Instead of putting D in first, we're going to use this D in fourth. Our ta, das, and ahs are going to change. So now it's going to be ta, ah, da, da. Ta, ah, da, da. Teaching and learning this technique may be tricky, very tricky at first, but in time, I promise, muscle memory will take hold. As I mentioned, there are pitch nuances in the overtone series where the slide can compensate, and I'd like to talk about the 2 biggest ones. The first is the 7th partial, which is incredibly flat. In fact, the other brass instruments avoid it altogether and play alternate fingerings, placing the notes on the 8th partial above it. Trombones, however, have the luxury of being able to compensate for the low pitch by raising the slide. Our primary positions for G, G flat, and F actually go in a raised version of themselves, which we never put A flat in first because we can't raise first position any higher. So if I demonstrate a G major scale, I'm going to make sure that once I get up to this 7th partial, these 2 notes, our F sharp and our G, don't go in those true positions that I was talking about. They are going to be raised on the slide to compensate for pitch. Watch how those top 2 notes relate to all the other slide positions. Just as an example, here's C in relation to F sharp. And if I go up to the 8th partial and play my A, you'll see how the F sharp, G, and A will be in that true 2nd position with F sharp and G raised. Now let's talk downstairs in the overtone series. You'll notice there is a giant gap between our first partial and our second partial. In fact, it's an octave. But if I extend my slide, the lowest note on the second partial is going to be an E. So we're missing all of those notes in between pedal B flat and low E. That's where the F attachment comes in. We add a valve which adds another loop of tubing, which is the equivalent of sixth position, this much, so that we can continue to go down past low E connecting to pedal B flat. So if this is the same length as sixth position, we should hear that F in sixth position versus first with the valve should sound the same. And now I'm able to gliss and extend the range down towards the pedal B flat. So now another seemingly unrelated question. How many of you seen a fretted guitar? What happens to those frets as they ascend on the string? They get closer and closer together. This is very similar to our overtone series. If you notice downstairs, we have a very wide octave, followed by between our second and third is going to be a fifth, then a fourth, then a major third, minor third, then a very flat minor third, and then it gets to a whole step and even smaller and smaller. So the same thing happens on the trombone and brass instruments in terms of the overtone series. Conversely, as we go lower, those frets on the guitar get wider and wider apart. The same is true as we add length onto the trombone. So when we have the F attachment engaged, we have all this additional length added to the horn, and so as we continue to add more and more length, we need to compensate and get even further and further away. So for example, our low F can be played in first, and our low E is going to be in second, but by the time we get to E flat, we need to add even more length to get it in tune. By the time we get to D, we need to add even more length to get it in tune, and so on, until we get to our low C, which is going to be pretty much eighth position. As an example, I'm going to play the notes on the third partial, which are all in true positions, followed by the F attachment below the second partial, and show you how the slide needs to be adjusted for these octaves as it descends in the F attachment. And you might notice that I didn't play a low B. Because on tenor trombones, we actually don't have enough length to get that low B. So there's technically only one note that we're missing on this instrument. That's where the bass trombone comes in. Aside from the whole instrument being slightly larger, we now have a second valve to give us more alternate positions and valve combinations to help us ascend lower. I still have the F attachment, just like on the tenor, but now I have the G flat valve, which now puts the instrument in G flat, if I just use this valve. So here's the F attachment. Now I can pitch the whole instrument in F sharp. So here's my fifth position F sharp, and just using this valve. And when I put the two together, it actually pitches the instrument in D. With the F attachment, or with both. And now, since I have the slide all the way in, I have all this room to descend, which does give us that low B natural. Since bass trombones spend much more time down in the low register, that's why they're given the second valve. I hope that you found this information helpful. If you have any questions at all, I'd be happy to get back to you and answer them. My email is dwatt3@uwyo.edu. Thank you very much.